Thanks everyone for coming out today. I know this is not easy for some people to come out. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. And thanks to Ian for that awesome talk. Being a black person myself, mixed, that meant a lot. And there's a lot to unpack there. Just want to thank her for that talk. But I'm going to talk about GitOps and Kubernetes today. And we're going to unpack that and dissect it. So a little bit about me. I've been in IT for 20 plus years, doing a lot of stuff at work and in the community, and I love community. I'm all about that and sharing knowledge, and that's one of the things I love to do, as you can kind of see there. There's a couple things I want to call out. Thank you to my employer, Avanade, for supporting me being able to do stuff like this. I think that's really important, and I think more employers need to support people that want to speak, be at conferences, and do stuff in the community. And then also, my Twitter is Bucatech, and you can find my blog at bucatech.com as well. So if you're interested in finding out what I'm doing in the future, just check those things out. So the first thing I want to start with, and this is not new, right? Every business is a software business. This is not new. It's a term that's been around for a long time. But in recent times, this has, resurfaced this, right? And it's very, very relevant today. This is not changing. So the pandemic has forced digital acceleration, right? Almost in a matter of days, businesses had to go digital, whether they wanted to or not, whether they were prepared or not. They had to, right? All over the world, especially in the US. It pushed consumers more and more towards online. With the lockdowns and being from home and having to get your food, like ordering through an app and going and getting it curbside, things changed. I remember even going with my wife to get stuff from Michael's and had to order online and go to the store and wait for them to bring it out. And there were problems. My wife was not always happy. Sometimes it took hours to get stuff. Their business had to transform like almost overnight. I don't know if they were prepared or not, but I know it added an extra load on their website and what they did, right? So what the pandemic did is it proved to businesses that going digital is not an option. It's absolutely not an option. It's a adapt or die kind of scenario. Right? In the pandemic, everyone having to go work from home almost overnight. There was a lot of change that was forced, but it was good. It accelerated transformation. And so, as a software business, you either digitize your business as code, and what I mean by that is digitize your business processes. And even some companies are digitizing entire departments. Now, for leaders that are doing that, that doesn't mean lay off a bunch of people, retool those people, move those people around, move them into other jobs, right? But digitizing your business's code is about better serving your customers. And then digitizing your services or products, right? I'm in the world of consulting, and believe it or not, we're a software business too. We have accelerators, we make software products. That's what separates us from our competition. And any consulting business that says otherwise, they don't get this, right? That every business is a software business. Now, a couple of key things here, right? We're in this accelerated period. It's being driven by many things. Connectivity, the pandemic accelerated it. Cloud, things like containers and Kubernetes that we're going to talk about today. DevOps, GitOps, all these different things are accelerating. No matter what your business delivers, technology is at the core, right? That's the world we live in today. And the competitive landscape is growing. Take a company that's local to Minnesota, for example, Upsy. Upsy is coming. They're coming for the warranty market. And they're doing it the right way. Now, the incumbents, the insurance companies that provide warranties today, I don't know if they get it, but there's going to be a rude awakening if they don't, because every business is a software business. And dominating businesses, they're agile, and they focus on building digital platforms. Now, for those of you that are in the audience today, and those of you that are online streaming, I want you to ask yourself this question. Does your company view itself as a software business? Let's think about that. Now, if they do, great. You have good leadership, you're going in the right direction. They're thinking about things in an innovative, transformational way. If you're unsure, find out. If the answer is no, are you in the right place? Right? Because every industry is being disrupted or headed for disruption. There are lots of smart people in the world that are always thinking about, how can I do this better in a digital way? How can I meet people where they are? Right? On their mobile devices, on their computers, online, how can I digitize? So if you're in an industry that's not looking at this, you need to. And the pandemic should have been a wake-up call. Now you can see the list of industries there, even childcare, right? My 5-year-old just finished preschool. Even preschool, we had an app to check him in, check him out, see how he was doing during the day. Teachers were able to upload status, pay our bill through the app. The app was critical, and it crashed a lot, which was irritating. And I worry about the security, but I'll let someone else cover that. But every industry is transforming and bringing in that digital component. Now, you may be asking, why is he up here and he's talking about every business is a software business? This talk is about Kubernetes and GitOps. This is critical because if your business doesn't have that stance, are they really going to support technologies like Kubernetes or models like GitOps and really understand why those things are needed or understand why cloud is needed and really allocate the funding and the resources and the time so you can use those to help drive that digital transformation in your business? So let's go down a journey and a story. So there's a made-up company that I came up with, L&T Co., right? They're in the logistics and transformation industry, and they're at the top of their market, right? There's newer competition coming in. There's younger entrepreneurs. There's businesses popping up that are coming for their top spot. And their leadership realizes this, and they need a way to maintain their spot, grow, and beat off this competition. Because they know if they don't move from analog to digital, they're going to die at some point. Right? So the leadership in this company decided that tech is going to be at the core of their business, is going to help with innovation and fuel that growth. And so their current state, they do logistics, they do transportation, they also build in-house software. So they have logistics software and fleet management software for them. For the future, they need to transform and take that logistics and fleet management software, and they want to build it into a SaaS model and start selling it. And so you might ask, why would they do that, right? Well, I'll ask you, why did Amazon clean up their infrastructure, optimize it, and decide to sell it to the world? Right? Called AWS. And we know how that story turned out. Right? So as you move into this digital world and think of yourself as a software business, it's better for you to cannibalize your own business versus letting your competition do it. So this company has decided that they're going to take their software, which is very good, put it into a SaaS model, and offer that out to the market. They're going to do some other things too, like IoT at the edge, better analytics, et cetera, right? And they know that autonomous trucks are coming. Those are coming, and they need to be prepared. So how are they going to do this, right? This is where cloud and Kubernetes enter the picture. And so they've decided they're going to go with Azure. I'm using Azure in my examples. I'm a Microsoft guy. And they decide they're going to use Azure Kubernetes Service. Kubernetes is good when it comes to isolation. There's integration with like Azure Active Directory, and you can really carve it up for multi-tenancy. And also, if they decide that Azure sucks, they could take their environment and move it to another cloud, right? And they're going to use IoT for edge. They're going to go with analytics in Azure. So they're going to use Azure, and they're going to use Kubernetes at the core. One thing they know is they need a better way to handle their continuous delivery and ensure the state of the environment. Since it's going to be offered to customers, it needs to be much more reliable. And they know that's critical. And that's where GitOps is going to come into play. So this is what their CICD looks like right now. This is just a basic example, right? So you have your developers, they're writing the code, they're building it, they're testing it, they're building the containers, throwing it over the wall. The ops people grab it, and they got their scripts, their infrastructure as code, and they're deploying it into the Kubernetes cluster. They know that's not going to work. And this is where GitOps comes into the picture. They want to use something that's transformational. They're using transformational technologies. Now they want to have a better way of delivering the software and the configuration of the environments, right? And so GitOps, I put this together. GitOps is an operating model. It's a pattern for cloud-native applications in Kubernetes environments. Most people think that GitOps is strictly for Kubernetes, and that's not true. It's actually for infrastructure. It's really for anything that you can automate. It's just that the software that's been built, the ones that are most known, we'll talk about those, are for Kubernetes. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. And GitOps is taking your declarative code that's in Git and making that the source of truth. And it's giving you that desired state. So let's dive into a little bit more. So here's a quick history of GitOps. This is on Weaveworks' website. That's where I got this image from. And so GitOps is actually not new. It's been around for a while. It was first coined in 2017 by Alex Richardson of Weaveworks, and he posted a blog about it. The blog is still out there. I'd highly recommend you go read about it. So they were doing this in their environment with their Kubernetes clusters, and they said, let's share this with the world. And there comes that community back into play, right? And then Kelsey Hightower tweeted about it in 2018, gave it some more gas, and cloud providers have been adopting it since. So if you go out to Azure Kubernetes Service, if you go to Azure Arc Enable Kubernetes, if you go on AWS, GKE, you'll see GitOps. You'll see stuff about GitOps and how to use it with the managed Kubernetes services. You'll even see it on Azure baked inside of the product, right? So you can go in the portal and set up your GitOps right there. And then there's been a lot of other stuff that's happened since then. There's a GitOps conference, there's GitOps working group, there's all this cool stuff happening about GitOps, and I'm here talking to you today about GitOps, right? So it's really growing. Now, GitOps is something that can help power disruption, right? It allows you to push code, not containers. So if you think about this and Git being the source of truth, your developers just put their code in the Git repository, make their commits, and let GitOps operators do its thing, right? And deploy the software or the configuration to the environment. It becomes the source of truth, describing the desired state of your entire system. And what that means is if it could be automated, or if it could be described, it could be automated and brought into GitOps. From everything from your software itself, the configuration of the environment, dashboards, etc. Now, here are some principles of GitOps. Right, so you should have declarative configuration. And these principles, by the way, any GitOps operator, so anyone building GitOps software should follow these. So if you're evaluating, you should make sure that the software, the tool that you're going to use follows these principles. Version controlled, so basically it should be in Git. Automated delivery, that's where the GitOps operators come in. So the GitOps operator is doing the creation, the change, the updating, etc., versus a human, right? And then you should have autonomous agents. Again, that's the GitOps operator to ensure that the desired state is always where you want it to be. And it's based on that Git repository. And then a closed loop, right? So monitoring the environment, making sure the state is ensured. Now, there's two types of GitOps operators. There is your infrastructure automation, and I didn't name these, right? So the first one is cloud infrastructure, but that's really about automating your infrastructure. So think about the cloud environment that surrounds the Kubernetes cluster, maybe PaaS, the networking, automate all that. Do it all through GitOps. And then there is the Kubernetes cluster itself, like what's going to stand that up and configure that. And then it's the cluster, which is the application automation. And this is the configuration of the Kubernetes cluster to support the application and what it needs. So if it needs ingress, if it needs specific namespaces, config maps, whatever, right? That should all be in code, and the GitOps operator can make that stuff happen, as well as deploying your application itself. Now, here are the main GitOps operators. So Flux is kind of the most popular one, most widely used right now. That was invented by Weaveworks, and they open sourced it. And then there's Argo CD. This is the one I like to use, and if we get to the demo, I'm going to show you Argo CD in action. And the difference between Flux and Argo CD, Flux doesn't have an interface. Argo CD has an interface as well as command line, so there's more flexibility. Then there's kubestack, which is all based on Terraform. And basically, you can use that to stand up the infrastructure around your Kubernetes cluster and your Kubernetes cluster itself. Now, Flux and Argo are really focused around the Kubernetes cluster and the configuration and the application. And then you have Jenkins X, which is much more than just a GitOps operator. It's a full CICD solution, but it has GitOps operator built into it. And then you have Atlantis, which is basically a GitOps operator that can work with Terraform. So anything that you can automate with Terraform, you can use Atlantis to bring GitOps, that GitOps pattern to your Terraform. Now, how do GitOps and Kubernetes win together, right? It's giving your developer an enhanced experience, letting them live in Git versus forcing them to learn things like kube control, apply, Helm, working with Helm charts, customize, and whatever else is out there, right? Continuous syncing, so you get more reliability in your environment, simplified operations. Everything is code. And this one's important because you have better rollback, right? If everything's described in Git, you're documenting, you also have rollback. You have consistency. You know who made what changes and when. You're actually shifting left on your security. So don't just use that as a buzzword, like live it, right? And so with the GitOps operators, the credentials live in the GitOps operators, and they run on your Kubernetes cluster. So they're not actually in your pipelines. You don't have to give the credentials to the Kubernetes cluster, to your dev or DevOps teams. You can limit that. And then it gives you that full audit trail. Again, everything is described in Git, so you can roll back if you need to. So a couple of other things. So DevOps often takes a push approach, where GitOps will take a pull approach. So the GitOps operator is sitting there and is continuously looking for changes in that Git repository. And if it sees changes, it's going to put that stuff in your environment. It's going to make it happen. Or if something changes in your Kubernetes cluster, it's always looking at the Git repository and seeing if those things are out of sync, and it's going to bring it back into sync. And then your GitOps operator will replace like those one-off infrastructure as code scripts. You know, we all know those teams that kind of have a repository of scripts that they use to manage environments. We all do it. Helm charts, right? This is taking all of that away and making Git the center of truth, and whatever's in Git is real. Now, here's just a quick, this is a dumbed down, or this is a basic flow for GitOps that I put together. So you commit your code or your infrastructure code, and then you would have like pull requests, right? And then that has to go through some sort of approval. It can be automated, it could be manual. And when that's approved, the code goes into the Git repository that the GitOps operator is pointed to, and then the GitOps operator will see if there's changes or new things, and will make those things happen in the environment. So that's the workflow. It's very basic. There's actually not a lot to this, which is really cool. And here's a visual breakdown of that workflow. And so you can see there, we have our application changes. Those are put in the repository, whether it's GitHub, Azure DevOps, whatever you want to use, as long as it's based on Git. And then you'll have a GitOps operator. In this example, we have Argo CD. It's looking for those changes. And when it sees those changes, it's going to go ahead and make that happen in that Kubernetes cluster, right? And this can use Kubernetes manifest files, Helm charts, customize. There's a lot of flexibility there. Now, if you want to adopt GitOps in your organization, right, here's some steps to do that. Now, going back to the beginning of the talk, where I spent a lot of time on every business is a software business, right? If you're in an organization that doesn't view itself that way, you're going to have a harder time adopting something new like GitOps. If you're in an organization that is all about transformation and views itself as a software business, this is going to be easier for you. So start off by just selecting an application. Most of the time, this is going to be in a POC, but if you can do it in real environments, it's even better. Figure out your runtime environment. So you probably already have a cloud selected, but figure that out. Figure out your Kubernetes clusters, whether you're going to run your own, whether those are managed services, etc., your container registries, or if you're using Helm charts, you got to figure out where you're going to host those Helm charts, etc. And then decide on tooling for the runtime infrastructure, right? So are you just going to use straight out Terraform? Are you going to use something like Atlantis, right, which is GitOps operator? Are you going to use something like Kubestack? But you got to figure that out. And then select your GitOps operator. I showed you a few. There's many more. There's more popping up all the time. Check out Weaveworks, their blog. They have great resources there. There's actually a list out there of the different GitOps operators. There's a long list, and it's always growing. So you need to pick one and figure out your sync method. You can do push with GitOps operators, but most of them do pull. And you'll probably end up going with pull. And then you'll have your Git repository, and you'll hook that up to the GitOps operator. Now, I'm going to jump into a demo here, and we'll see how this goes. So what I'm going to show you when we get this connected is I'm using Azure Kubernetes service, and I'm using Argo CD, and I'm just using a repository on my GitHub, right? And I just have some Kubernetes manifest files in there. I do have customized setup, so I'm using that to specify my dev and my prod environments. And we'll use GitOps just to deploy into my Kubernetes cluster. And this is kind of what tech's like in real life, right? Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't, and you got to figure it out. There's my Git repository, so you can see here. I'm just using Hello K8s, just a sample basic web application out there. So you can see I got my customized set up here. And then I got a dev and a prod, so pretty basic stuff. And I have Argo CD here. So we're good to go. And what I want to show you here over in Azure, and I am using all the UI right now. This stuff is a lot faster in command line interface. So what I want to show you here, I don't have any Hello Kubernetes namespaces there. So this is really simple, right? So I come down, I click on Create Application. Let me grab my namespace here because I'm going to need that. Actually, I will grab the repository. So I'm just going to call this one dev, right? So we got dev, default project. We're going to sync this automatically. We can apply it if it becomes out of sync, so that's where that desired state comes into play, right? And there's a lot of other options here, but we don't have time to kind of go through all of those. Because we're going to put our repository in here. We have to choose our path. And Argo CD recognizes when you have like Helm charts in a repository or when you're using just manifest files. So it recognized that, hey, he's using customize. So what it did is it put customized properties down there, right? Which is pretty sweet. And then this is our namespace, so dev K8s. Actually, let me not do that. Let's not change things in the demo on the fly, because that's when things don't work, right? So I'm using trusty Notepad. Yes, I'm using Notepad. I do use VS Code, but for this, today I'm using Notepad. All right, so let's create that. We'll see what happens. All right, so there it is. There's my application. There's my first application. You can see it's out of sync, but it's creating things, right? So that's where it shows that it's syncing. And then if I come over here to my Kubernetes cluster, it should create the namespace for me, all the resources, pretty quick. While that's syncing, let's go and let's create the second one. So let's create our prod. All right, so we're just simply going to call this prod, okay? Default project. We're going to do that. We're going to do the automatic sync again. And let me put in my namespace first. And this one is going to be prod. All right. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this, right? You can point this to different Kubernetes clusters. You can point it to different namespaces. There's a lot of flexibility with the GitOps operators. So let me grab my repository URL again. We'll put that in there, and we'll go ahead and create this one. Oh, I made a mistake. So I needed to specify the path for my actual repository for this app. And there we go. That one's creating. Let's check on this one. This one is still syncing. And this is usually a lot faster. But what it's doing here is this is my application. So within Argo CD, you can have projects, you can have applications. And in those, you can have projects and you can have applications, and then you can set up the actual connections inside of those applications. And so you can point this to dev environments, production environments, and you can point it to entirely different Kubernetes clusters. So it looks like I'm out of time, unfortunately. I'm going to write a blog post about this to show the details and the steps, and maybe even do like a video on it. That way you can see this in action. You did get to see like the whole process of setting up a repository in a GitOps operator, and that was already connected to my Kubernetes cluster. So thanks for coming out again, and thanks for listening to my talk.